I have some good news and I have some bad news. Which do you want first?
I'm a glutton for punishment, so they'll take the bad news first.
Okay. You sure? Okay, here we go.
Okay.
This is extraordinarily bad news from the European Union. This is something that I have been warning listeners and readers about for over 3 years now. It was included in both the Great Reset and the Dark Future books. We really went into it in Dark Future, talking about this can't happen. If this no, really. Well, it's just happened. We've talked about it on the air several times, but now it's official and it's in writing, and so I'm going to explain it and tell you what it is and what it's going to do. It looked like this bill was going to die several times over the past few months. In fact, Justin Haskins and I had a big argument. I should have made a $3,000 bet with him, and then I could have paid you off for the Michelle Obama thing. He said it would fail, and it is not. Now it is one of the biggest threats to freedom in America, both in the short and the long term, because of this law in Europe, our society, through corporate decision-making and business partnerships, are going to be forced to conform with the European rules, values, and environmental standards. European social justice metrics are now officially, they have to be imposed on America through this law. The only thing that will change this is if Congress acts and the president acts. This president and this, at least, Senate will never stop this. Here's what's going to happen. The EU has established an extraordinarily complex, very large ESG system that covers all companies. And when I say all companies will need to comply with. This includes both covered companies based in the U.S. as well as non-EU companies, such as those in America and Canada that operate in the EU. So in other words, you sell, I think it's $500 million worth of stuff, and you have to comply. You sell $500 million in Europe, just under that, then you have to comply. But so do all of the companies that you do business with. So if you're a small company and you're making widgets and you sell them to a company that is making big money, and I wonder if this applies to Amazon. You sell something on Amazon, that's a company that's making at least $500 million in Europe. You're going to have to comply.
Eden Pure is back with their famous Thunderstorm air purifier. It's their top seller air purifier that quickly destroys viruses, odors, mold, and so much more. With thousands of 5-star reviews, you know it works. Any smell will vanish after just a few seconds of the Thunderstorm being plugged in. Odors, litter boxes, trash cans, cigarette smokes, dirty diapers. Wow, I don't want to visit that house. The powerful Thunderstorm sends out O3 molecules that seek out and destroy odors. I have these in my house. They're great. The molecules go behind and under furniture. Nothing can hide from the Thunderstorm. Best of all, no filters to buy over and over again, saving you money. Start enjoying your home again and get several Thunderstorms. Right now, you can save $200 on an Eden Pure Thunderstorm 3-pack for the whole home protection. You get 3 units for under $200. Put one in your basement, bedroom, family room, kitchen, wherever you need the air to be clean. Go to EdenPureDeals.com. EdenPureDeals.com. Use the promo code Beck and save.
The covered companies will be required to submit reports to the European government authorities if they are EU-based customers or companies with more than 1,000 employees and a worldwide turnover of more than $489 million. Turnover is another word for revenue or income, but why wouldn't you say that? This word bothers me. I just think it's one of those It's like stakeholders that nobody notices, and then you hear stakeholders and you know what it means. You're like, oh, crap, that's everybody. Non-EU based companies, such as U.S. companies now, fall under the requirements if they have a net turnover of more than $489 million with the European Union. Franchise and licensing agreements, as well as subsidiaries of larger companies, will also fall under the EU's ESG regime. I don't know exactly. The lawyers have not even really explained this yet. But we have been covering this for so long. We think we know what this means, but licensing agreements, I write books. Some of them sell in Europe. Simon & Schuster sells books like crazy over in Europe. They're making over $489 million, I'm sure, in Europe. Am I now forced to comply? Thank God I have Mercury Inc. now, and I don't have to do Simon & Schuster. But am I required? Most importantly, all covered companies will need to ensure that the businesses in their supply and value chains, I don't know what that means. Do you know what supply and value chain is? Stu, you're the head of Ford. Have you checked your value change? What is exactly the numbers on your value change? What the hell does that mean?
Value chain or value change?
Value chains.
I mean, I'm very in touch with my value chain.
Yeah, okay.
On a daily basis.
Also, those companies, anybody who makes a widget for these companies has to adhere to the relevant ESG rules. Remember, ESG is environmental, social, and governance. So, do you have enough, gay, black, hermaphrodites that only have one leg? Do you have them on your board? Well, why not? That's your governance part. Social is all of the social justice crap that we've been fighting. And E, of course, is environment. This bill, by the way, will destroy the petroleum industry. And don't worry, petroleum is not used in anything. Nothing in making petroleum. This will indirectly impose Europe's ESG standards on countless American companies, including many small businesses. All covered companies will need to create climate change transition plans, prevention action plans, establish contractual assurances from a direct business partner that it will ensure compliance with the business's prevention action plan. So, you make a widget, but you don't sell it to Ford. You sell it to somebody that is making radios for Ford. You don't have anything to do with Ford. But if you want to sell a widget to another company that does business with Ford, or sell it to another company that company sells to another company to sell to Ford, you see how this is working? And if you don't comply in America, you cannot sell anything in Europe. You also establish contractual assurances, business prevention, and make necessary financial or non-financial investments or upgrades. The hell does that mean? Individual countries will write their own laws in accordance with this new EU ESG law. Each country in the EU will be responsible for enforcing its rules and issuing punishments. Civilian and activist groups also are covered in this bill. Activist groups can bring private cause of action against companies for failing to meet guidelines. Well, open up the floodgates for attorneys right there. The EU requirements are going to be phased in beginning in 2027. Now, let me get into the actual requirements that we can. This is a very complex and very big bill. Over the weekend, thank God for Justin Haskins and his team. He went through all of it. So let me tell you what these rules are. Again, we're talking about something that just passed on Friday in the EU that affects us, and it's the economy, it's the environment, it's free speech, it's all of it. So there's not a single long list of specific rules that companies need to comply with. There are some specific rules that are included. However, this new law includes hundreds of vague statements and references to existing international agreements and EU regulations. Many of those are also long agreements featuring many more rules, such as the Paris Climate Agreement and the International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights. You know that. You're complying, I'm sure. Oh, you're not? I guess we should read up on it. As a result of the complexity and expansiveness of the rules, the total number of social credit scoring metrics, let me say that again, the total number of social credit scoring metrics included in this law is currently unknown, but is likely in the hundreds, if not more than 1,000. It's hard to tell currently. You get social credit scores. Now, let me ask you something. Is the EU actually going to stop buying everything that comes from China? Because there's no way China will comply with this. Do you know what that will do to the prices to the European Union if they stop buying things from China? And if we don't stop this, if we stop buying things from China, prices, you will go broke quickly. Businesses will go out of business quickly. Now, here's just one example of the law where it's not economic. It's actually on climate change and free speech. The directive is an important legislative tool to ensure corporate transition to a sustainable economy. What they're saying there is no longer a capitalist system, including to reduce the existential harms and costs of climate change, to ensure alignment with the global net zero by 2050, and to avoid any misleading claims regarding such alignment, and stop greenwashing, disinformation, and fossil fuel expansion worldwide in order to achieve international and European climate objectives. So notice they throw in misinformation. One law firm notes, companies are required to effectively engage with stakeholders. Let me say that again. Companies are required to effectively engage with stakeholders. Do you remember who the stakeholders are? Because they're not you. The stakeholders are the governments, the social activists, and I think that's it, and the companies themselves. Those three get together because, the Sierra Club is a stakeholder in making sure that our trees are okay and our environment is clean. The government is just a representative of you. Yeah. I stopped believing that a long time ago. So you don't have a voice. Your voice is the Senate, the House, and the president. That's the stakeholder that they have to deal with. Companies have to sit down when they're making these rules with those guys. This includes carrying out consultations at various stages of the due diligence process. That's going to be cheap. During which companies must provide comprehensive information. Now, according to the European Parliament, member states will be required to provide companies with detailed online information of their due diligence obligations via practical portals containing the Commission's guidance. They will also create or design and designate a supervisory authority to investigate and impose penalties on any non-compliant firms. These will include naming and shaming. That's a quote. This will include, in quotes, naming and shaming and fines of up to 5% of the company's net worldwide turnover. Again, worldwide turnover. Why not use revenue? Additionally, a breach of certain CSDDD obligations, that's the catchy acronym for it, may result in civil liability for damages. However, a company cannot be held liable for any damage caused by its business partners in its chain of activities. That's the bad news. I can guarantee you we are at least a year, maybe 2 years ahead of everyone else. They are not paying attention to this. Do not dismiss this when you go in to vote. Which candidate is most, and I mean every candidate, is most likely to stand up and say, no? If the United States, a huge market, decides to say, we're not playing your game, Europe will not be able to stand on its own. China, they'll just give a pass to because everybody, for some reason, thinks that authoritarian state that puts their own people with social credit scores and puts them in camps is okay. Let me ask you this. Do you think Europe is actually going to have Apple pay a fine or stop making its products in China because they're made by slaves? No. This is a way to, look, there is a book over in our museum, very rare, because the king had them all burned. It was during the witch trials over in Europe. And it was one book that says, this is hogwash. This is just the king wanting these rules so he can get rid of his enemies. King had them all burned. We can find all kinds of stuff that say witches are real. That book is extraordinarily rare. Why? The king needed them to go away because he could have anybody who displeased him. He's a witch. She's a witch. Burn him at the stake. That's exactly what's going to happen here. Companies like Apple will be fined, Facebook fined doing business over in Europe, even though they're working with the Chinese. But any company that decides to stand and say, no, we don't believe in this, we're not doing this, you're doomed. You're doomed. If you play ball with the government in one way or another, you're all right.